Okay, so they say that Donald Trump has weaponized the government. Okay, that he turned the DOJ loose on his enemies, that he has targeted John Bolton and obsessed with James Comey. They've said it a million times over and over again without ever asking, who actually held the trigger here. Okay, but for a moment, just for the case of this argument, let's just say all of that was true. Let's say Trump had used the power of the state to punish those two people who had crossed him. Okay, people like Bolton and Comey. Just say, for the sake of argument, that's all true. These are men who sat in the highest rooms of power. They have lawyers, they have money, they have microphones. If that were true, it would be ugly, it would be dangerous, and it would be limited. Because what we just learned from the Department of Homeland Security is something far, far worse. This time the target is not a political rival. It's not a Washington insider. It was you. There's new news that is coming out today, according to the DHS Privacy Office report, which was launched after a bunch of whistleblowers came forward, that now says that FEMA did not mishandle just a few cases. They kept notes. They were making a list. They tracked Americans, their political and religious beliefs during disasters. Not in theory, in black and white. Let me give you some of the quotes. Angry political rant. Sign in yard states I'm a bitter gun owner clinging to my religion. Homeowner had a sign stating this is Trump country. These are not comments, about storm patterns. These are comments about people. And when these people were flooded, they were homeless, they were desperate, and asked for help from the same government that preaches compassion and equity, they got something entirely different. They got silence, delay, and sometimes nothing at all. The DHS report now confirms, quote, FEMA violated the Privacy Act of 1974 by collecting and storing data tied to protected speech. They were checking bumper stickers and writing you down in a book. They logged gun signage 72 times, Trump 15 times, firearms 5 times, Biden twice. The FEMA workers then, and we told you all this, but it was a conspiracy theory. Now it has been proven. FEMA workers skipped homes if you had a MAGA flag or a yard sign. And then they left notes. There was a political flyer. I'm quoting. So I didn't leave a FEMA brochure. Quote, we don't recommend anyone visit this location. End quote. That's not a clerical error here. That's a blacklist. This is the same agency that airlifts people off of rooftops after hurricanes, that distributes food and shelter when nothing else works. And they were told to avoid Americans because who they voted for. Not terrorists, not criminals, citizens. You. I will tell you, I have been in disaster after disaster. Much of it not of my own creating, but natural disaster all over the world. I have shown up at the hurricanes and the floods and the tornadoes with help. And not once did it even occur to me to ask you, what's your political affiliation? Not once did it even occur to any of us to say, where do you stand on the Second Amendment? Who did you vote for? What do you believe? What church do you go to? Never. Do you believe in God? Never. That is absolutely 100% un-American. Un-American. I read this report. The floods in Florida and the tornadoes in Tennessee and the hurricanes in South Carolina, where people waited for days for aid that never came. And when it did come because of pressure from people like us, survivors, Americans who lost everything, received a $700 check. $700. Meanwhile, billions are being funneled to illegal immigrants, to foreign wars, to bureaucracies studying climate equity. And now we know why. because they were busy making notes about bumper stickers. I read this morning, and I saw it firsthand, but I couldn't prove it. But I saw it firsthand, and I reported on it at the time. But they could say it was an isolated incident, and I couldn't prove otherwise. We can now. The report is now out. This is as un-American as our withdrawal in Afghanistan. Why was that so offensive? Because we left in A, humiliation. That's the least of my concerns. We left in humiliation. We betrayed all of our allies, and we left people behind. We never leave people behind. Never. That's one of our highest rules. You don't leave people behind. One of the biggest things about Americans is that we are generous, we are good, we're charitable, we help everybody. We are the world's lifeboat. And now we find out we had a president and an administration that was making a political list, a blacklist, where they would not give aid to Americans who are suffering. You're taking my tax dollars, and if I happen to be the one that needs aid, I don't get coverage because of who I voted for? It's the most offensive thing I've heard of our country ever doing on aid. Ever. Can you remember anything like this? Ever? I mean, they say democracy dies in darkness. Yeah, well, why don't you shine a light on some of these things? It doesn't die in darkness. It apparently is dying in databases. The FEMA database quietly flags citizens as politically undesirable. Let me ask you this. What would the media have said or done if Donald Trump had ignored those who lost their homes in California after the ravaging fire? If he didn't just show up, it would be bad enough, right? But he showed up. He brought his cabinet with him. He brought FEMA. He brought relief. He tried to cut all of the red tape in California. Couldn't get that done. But he was there. Can you imagine if he just hadn't have shown up, which Biden never did? If he hadn't have shown up, worse yet, can you imagine what would be said if you found out that Donald Trump, his FEMA, was making a list and saying they voted for Gavin Newsom. They voted for Joe Biden. No help for them on their house. Can you imagine the outrage? I would be outraged. I am just as outraged that it happened under the last administration. Why? Why am I outraged? Because it cannot happen. It cannot happen under any administration. You allow this to happen and stand. Good luck, America, on what you have left. Will anything be done? Will anyone go to jail? Will the left be outraged by this? You want to talk about no kings? What is a king other than let that serf die? We don't care about those guys. They aren't for the king. You know, Mercury One has already rebuilt homes. We're moving people back into their homes every single day. I know it because I watch Mercury One do it. But not in California. We've tried in California. Gavin Newsom, the Democrats, they're not helping those people. They won't allow any help for those people. Their own voters they don't care about. If you get in the way of this leftist administration, these leftists, you get in the way, it doesn't matter. Ends justify the means. Let them die. You know, they keep warning you about authoritarianism, but here it is, cloaked in compassion, branded with a FEMA logo. This wasn't rogue, not a rogue agent. This is not a one-off scandal. This was a database. The DHS investigation says political bias was systematic dating back to at least September 2021. That means that while the administration accused conservatives of conspiracy theories, it was literally compiling lists. And the media went right along with it. And will the media ever tell you this story? When, what was her name, the FEMA administrator, Criswell, testified before Congress in 2021, she said, this was an isolated case. Well, unfortunately, your files tell a different story. It's not isolated. It was national, and it was deliberate. Homeland Security Secretary Christine Noem said, quote, for years, FEMA employees under the Biden administrations intentionally delayed much-needed aid to Americans suffering from natural disasters on purely political grounds. This is not your political enemy. This is your neighbor. That's not mismanagement. That's moral rot. This is not just another Washington scandal. This is a betrayal of the covenant between citizen and state. But they're not going to tell you that. Media won't talk to you about that. The Democrats won't do a damn thing about this. No one on that side will condemn this. But they'll talk to you all day today about how Trump is destroying the White House. Oh my gosh, he's destroying the White House and he's spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a ballroom of his own money and other people who are donating. And you know what? They're not donating in secret. It's all listed right there. They don't go through Arabella Advisors or the Tides Foundation. They give it straight, and it's reported straight. So you know who built that building. My gosh. They'll report on the White House today, but they're not going to report on your house, you know, when FEMA didn't show up because you were on their list. The moment this government decides that you are less worthy of rescue because of how you vote, your faith, your flag, a bumper sticker, you don't need darkness for democracy dying. The republic is dead. There is no republic. A republic represents all voters. It ceases to exist. You do have a king. You know, weaponizing law enforcement against political opponents is really bad. But weaponizing disaster relief against ordinary citizens, people standing on their roof waiting for a helicopter that never comes, is something absolutely pitch black dark. If your politics can determine whether you live or die, we cease to be a republic. We cease to deserve the rights God gave us.